It's so cold. But however cold I think it is, it's probably much, much colder. At this point, the wind and snow have whipped my cheeks so hard they barely feel anything. Small blessing, I guess. My feet aren't so lucky. Every step I take drives my snowshoe a foot deep into the snow. We're up at 7,700 meters by now. Everett Summit is at 8,800. Tomorrow we'll enter what's popularly called the death zone, the area above 8,000 meters where there isn't enough air to sustain human life. That's why we pack the oxygen. After that, we'll crest the summit and come back down from the Chinese route. I'm shaken out of my reverie by a noise. I've been trudging forward through the lashing wind and snow, pulled by the rope of Davies ahead of me and Samuel behind. But through the shrill screaming of the blizzard, I can just hear Davies yell my name. I freeze, and my eyes adjust. Ahead of Davies, the snow sags just a little bit. It signals the presence of a crevasse, filled with snow. If any of us had stepped on it, the snow would have collapsed, and we'd be sitting in a vertical trench 40 feet deep with no way out. I let out a breath that had frozen inside my chest. We set up the ladder to span the crevasse and slowly move across it. We all make it to the other side when a spare ice pick that was hanging off Samuel's pack slips off. It crashes onto the fluffy white snow and is instantly swallowed up. We're left staring at the arm-sized patch of emptiness where it landed less than a second ago. This time, Davies is the one who let out a whistle. We keep moving. The sun is going to set in just a little bit, and we need to get to a safe spot to hunker down for the night. Trying to climb in the night is suicide on Everest. We've just about found a nice, rocky patch to set up our tents on when the steel tip of my boot clunks on something. I freeze again, then force my eyes open and look down. A brown, desiccated hand sticking out of the snow. Its fingers extend towards my boot. I draw a sharp breath. That was a close one. Then I yell to the others, "Body!" They both turn for a second before Davy yells in response. He's only 10 feet away, but we have to scream to hear anything over the gale. "Sam, set up the tents. I'll help Tom." He trudges over, pulling his collapsible spade off his pack and quickly popping it open. We get to work. That is what we're here for, after all. Briefings were very clear. Our job was to summit Everest from the Nepal side and come down from the Chinese side, using the most popular route, and to bury any and all bodies we came across. I don't really know why. The Foundation is big on need to know, and I guess they decided I didn't need to know. Davies probably did, since he was team lead. The rest of us just got handed climbing gear and a shovel, and were told to get to work. I uncover its torso while Davies digs a new hole in the soft snow a good meter and a half deep for it. It's an adult female. I've seen enough of these bodies to register that. The only splash of color on the dried blood brown body is a yellow scarf around its neck. To confirm it's a 5140. I sprinkle a little water on it. It makes contact with the skin before instantly freezing and shattering. I shudder and instantly regret complaining about our footwear. If that had made contact with my skin. Davies finishes with the hole, though the weather is doing its best to reverse his progress. We use the tips of our survival shovels to push and roll the body into the shallow grave. It lands with a solid thump. Then we get to work filling in the snow. The whole process takes about half an hour. By now, the sun is set and it's getting dark very quickly. I give the snow a quick pat down to solidify it, and we start trudging back towards the tents. The blizzard is getting worse. Samuels is standing outside waiting for us. We hurriedly crawl inside our tents. The other two share one, and I'm in the other with the packs and equipment. In here, the wind and snow doesn't reach. It's a sudden respite. I open my pack and grab the thing that vaguely resembles a small laptop. I flip the screen open. It's a satellite computer, one of the only ways to communicate with the ground from up here. I type in a quick status update to command. 4 bodies today, buried all. Going to drop zone tomorrow, and hit send. I don't expect a response this quickly, so I put it back in the pack, strip off my coat and boots, and squirm myself into my sleeping bag. Climbing is exhausting work. I'm out like a light. By the time I'm out of my tent the next morning, the others are already suited up and ready to go. It's just before the crack of dawn. The blizzard has mostly subsided, or at least moved farther up. We work in silence to dismantle the tents, pack everything up, and get moving again. It's uncharacteristically quiet on the mountain, just the crunching of fresh fallen snow under our feet. As we leave camp, I swear I can still see the raised lump of snow where we buried the stiff last night. We start making our way up the mountain. The air is thin here, which means clouds are a non-issue. You can see all the way down. We've only been walking for maybe 45 minutes before Davies calls out,
"Body."
He and Samuels get it this time. This one's relatively fresh. The skin hasn't frozen over or sloughed away. Lots of frostbite, though. Seems exposure got them. Just as he's finished digging the hole, Samuels loses his footing in the soft snow. He flings out a hand to break his fall, and it lands right on the shriveled chest of the corpse. It's barely a second before he jumps back, but it's a second too late. His furred glove has already frozen itself to the corpse's chest, trapping his hand inside it. I immediately start running through the snow towards them, but Davies is closer. He wraps his arms around Sam's chest and heaves backward, both falling on their asses as the glove gives way. For my part, I freeze when I come up next to them. The tips of the fingers on Sam's hand are blackened and gangrenous, advancing and withering away as we watch. Davies lets go of him and scrambles backward, pulling out his bladed shovel. In only 4 seconds, the blackish rot has already crawled to his wrist, and it's not slowing down. The tips of his fingers where it started have turned hard and blue. They're frozen. It's dead silent, except for the eternal screeching of the wind. Quietly, I unholster my service weapon, but Sam beats me. Using his free hand, he reaches behind him and frees his pack, letting it fall behind him. He pops out his pistol and looks at me with a terrified look in his eyes, the kind of thing you see from a deer in the headlights. "Sam, don't do..." "Tell them I did good, Tom. Make sure my family gets the money." Then he turns around and lunges at the corpse, tackling it. The momentum rolls them both into the hole he just finished digging. They slam to the bottom. A moment later, we hear a gunshot from the bunker. It echoes around the mountains. I fall onto my ass. Jesus Christ. We buried them fast and deep. No conversation, no memorial. We split up what was in his pack and leave behind an empty, unmarked grave. With only the two of us, the ascent is faster, but more dangerous. We find more and more bodies up here. The death zone is where most Everest deaths happen, fittingly. All the danger of climbing is multiplied the closer you get to the top, plus altitude sickness crossed with the risk of simply suffocating from the thin air. We alternate between digging the hole and uncovering the bodies. We do it slowly. After Sam, we'd be stupid to take any risks. Every corpse, I shovel the snow off. I see his face for a split second. Then it fades and I'm looking at whatever poor fucker didn't make it to the top. 8 more bodies buried that day, not counting Sam. The first time I hear Davey say something is when the sun is setting and we're putting up camp. We share a tent and we're huddling around the camp stove as it warms rations for us. Then, out of nowhere, his head shoots up and turns toward the zipper. "Did you hear that?" I freeze for the second time that day. Then I hear it. A thump-thump outside. So soft you would miss it if you weren't listening for it. We pick up our pistols from where they're resting on our parkas. I crawl to the front of the tent and unzip it ever so slightly. It's just as desolate, windy, and snow-covered as when we entered. Nothing's moving. Then I hear it again. Thump-thump. I nod to Davies and open the zip entirely. We move out, raising our guns. It's coming from the edge of the mountain, near a fresh snowdrift. I approach. Then I realize it's coming from under the snowdrift, muffled by it. Davies takes up position next to it with his gun, while I start shoveling. It only takes 2 or 3 scoops before my shovel hits something hard. Another 5140, adult female. Stuck in a particularly awkward position, its legs hang into a small crevasse, made invisible in the darkness. As the wind blows, its bony legs knock between the sides of the fissure. Thump thump. We quickly dig a new hole. I guess this one was buried by some other team, but evidently not deep enough. The last thing I see as I shovel new snow onto it is a bit of yellow fabric in its parka, shining reflectively off our lanterns. A scarf. We hit the south summit the next day. The Hillary Step is the last portion of the gauntlet that is Everest, a nearly vertical rock sheet 10 meters high, edged on both sides by a 2,500 meter drop. Climbing it is a challenge in the best of times. Over the next 3 hours, we achingly advanced, meter by meter, up the rock face. Every muscle in my body aches. In front of me, Davies inches upward before slamming a pick in to help me. Then a pebble falls onto my helmet, making a ding before falling away. The ledge Davy's left foot rests on cracks. "Davies, left!" He immediately pivots, just as the ledge gives way. His left foot dangles in the air for a second before he pulls himself higher, finding a new footrest. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. We make it to the top, eventually. The summit of Mount Everest is a sight that is impossible to convey in text, so I won't waste your time. It really makes you realize how utterly tiny you are compared to the massive monuments of stone and snow around you. "Hey Tom, take a picture of me." Davies hands me a tiny Kodak and poses with the sun behind him, giving a view into the entire Mahalangir Himmel. He smiles, the first time I've seen him do so since Samuel's. Then, just as my finger falls onto the button, it turns into a face of open-mouthed horror. He screams. The snowdrift he's standing on puffs up as a brown, crusted hand shoots out, wrapping around his calf. He stumbles backwards right onto the edge. The body is pulled out after him, a 5140, its mouth open in a dry grin. Then I see its chest, a frozen black glove affixed to it. I rush forward, but it's too late. Davies balances on the edge for a split second. Then the 5140 is pulled out and knocks his legs out from underneath him. We make eye contact, then both of them vanish. I hear them scream all the way down. "This isn't real. This can't be happening. They're dead. They're not zombies. They're not supposed to be able to move. Jesus! The one with the scarf? I thought it was a coincidence. No, it followed us up. They're intelligent. Oh God." I immediately turned around and tried to go back down. That's when I saw them at the bottom of the step. A 5140, dressed in all black climbing wear and a foundation patch on its shoulder. Samuel's. 3, maybe 4 others behind him. All of them ones I had thrown into shallow graves and buried on our way up. All staring up at me with those hungry, sunken teeth and eyes. There was no way I could make it off the summit without touching them. Davies had had the satellite communicator. It was over. I found this recorder in my bag, forgot I had packed it. To whichever climber or recovery team finds this, stop. You have to stop sending people up. There are so many more of these things than you think there are. You have to stop before more people die. The air is thin up here, which is probably why I'm not hyperventilating. No air to breathe, but it's not gonna last. You can see the entire world from here. It's very beautiful. It's so cold. I'm going to try to knock the corpses at the bottom of the step off the side before oxygen deprivation sets in. I'm going to leave the recording here with my pack. Please, don't send anyone after us. SCP-5140 refers to a number of frozen corpses scattered across Mount Everest, located in the Himalayas of Tibet. When physically exposed to heat of any form, including body heat, they will absorb it without raising their temperature, which rests at approximately 10 degrees Celsius, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. If an individual dies as a result of contact with SCP-5140 instances, their corpse will become another SCP-5140 instance. Recent excavation has revealed SCP-5140 instances form a significant portion of Everest itself. Currently, it is estimated 45% of Mount Everest's mass is formed by corpses. I open to try and look at it again. It's starting to make more sense. Looks clearer than before. I can make out a few sentences. In the land of ash, and old rusty worm slithers, and hungry head glares. Dreamers all aboard. Take a seat when the maw shuts. Dreamers all aboard. Finally, sunrise. I shuffle out from the pile of tattered hardcover books and try and get my bearings. The nights are far too long in this place, and far too dark. I can barely see my hands in front of my face when the light dies out. That's why we can't travel at night. As the night sky bleeds to deep blue, I can allow my eyes to adjust again. The landscape remains unchanged. I stand on a pile of worn books packed into an open train car. This train car is one of many, one of hundreds. In fact, it just stretches straight ahead from one horizon to the other. If this sun is like ours, that means that the train is heading due south. The noise is almost unbearable. The grinding and shrieking of metal are never-ending as the entire rusty streak of train cars barrels through this gray wasteland. Not even a shrub or outcrop in either direction. I can't even see the tracks below with all the dust being kicked up. It's either dust or ash. I can't tell which. When the Foundation assigned us to investigate, they sent us through the front engine, which was stationary. It was sitting in a muddied mire in some humid southern swampland, and with only 8 corroded cars attached to it. I felt like I needed a tetanus shot just from looking at it. There were 6 of us then, a security team of 5 and a lady from research and acquisitions. There was a small home nearby. The entire family went missing in one night, but we were not here to retrieve bodies. We thought we'd be eaten alive by mosquitoes, but as we got closer to the site, they backed off. It was dead quiet, with hardly anything living around the parked train. We went through the front just fine. There were no components on the damn engine, just a hollow shell. Hell, if I knew how it got there. Looks as though it was stripped for parts. Next was a train car of rotted timbers, some of which appeared to be oozing some kind of sickly sap, more of a pus than a passenger car. I remember one of the security agents getting jumpy and shooting one of the passengers right in the face when it turned to look at him. We all froze waiting for a reaction, but nothing. Looked like he shot a mummified man sitting in his seat with clothes too decomposed to tell what they were. Tattered black rags across his withered frame, shrink-wrapped in a crispy gray skin, but it had a moldy briefcase with rusty latches in his lap. There were several others sitting in seats spread out all over the train car. Commuters? One of the members mumbled. It looked back at him with hollowed eyes and a furrowed expression like it had just had its day ruined, then picked up the case and tossed it at our feet. I finally broke the silence after a full minute. "Pick it up and take it back to the rally point," I ordered to the agent in the back. He was relieved to do so and hustled back through the engine to get out. I was glad he was able to get off when he did, because that's when we felt the whole train move forward. It was such a jolt that we all came crashing down like dominoes right in the aisle. When we stood back up, we could see that we were somewhere else entirely. That was yesterday. Well, yesterday in train time, not regular time. Regular time, it's been like 2, maybe 3 days. I'm not really sure. The sun is getting brighter. It's blinding. Takes up half of the sky and is as bright as a flare. Now that I can actually see, I look at the books in the pile I've been laying on, all bound in a sort of stained burlap cloth. Each one with the same title, but I can't read it. Whatever the hell that is supposed to mean. The inside is, well, I can't make sense of the language or the characters either. Cyrillic or maybe Hindi. Characters I'm just not familiar with at all. They seem to change when I glance back at them. Something anti-mimetic, likely. I close it up and find a place in my vest to store it. I hear Michelle as she starts coughing. She's not getting better. Not since she fell into that open tanker car filled with only God knows what. "You're awake. Feel any better?" I ask loudly. I have to shout over the noise. "Not hardly. I can move though." She gets up on wobbly legs. "Can you see the engine?" "No." I squint hard down the endless cars through the wind. "It's not there. At least I can't see it. I can still see a little black smoke ahead, but that's all." I remove the radio from my hip and key it up. "Zeta 5, this is Zeta 1. We have daylight and are going to continue toward extraction. You copy?" "This is Zeta 1. We are unable to hear you. If you can hear us, we are moving south. I still have Blue Asset with me." "Why do you still use that thing?" Michelle grabs her laptop case and clambers up on top of the pile. Her raspy voice is getting more noticeable. "Because it's smart to. We keep talking. We keep communicating. But you can't understand each other. That doesn't mean they can't hear us. Come on. We have daylight to burn. There has to be at least 100 cars to the horizon. You going to carry that thing all the way back?" She tucks the case under her arm. "It's recording everything. We just can't." Michelle stops and coughs into her sleeve. It's that same black stuff as yesterday. We both look at each other concerned. But there was no time to dwell on it. Over the pile of books and into the next train car. All these train cars are unique in their own right. Some more memorable than others. We were able to pass over the tops of 40 rusty cars in the long morning. It's best to travel on top rather than through if we can. I thought the long night would help us rest, but I feel just as tired as I did yesterday. There is one car coming up with no roof. I motion to Michelle that we have to hop down. She nods. Her sleeves are stained black with her coughing. No point in keeping it hidden now. Instead, I turn my attention to the jump up ahead. I can't see inside for some reason. Even with the huge sun overhead, the shadows are too deep. It'll be a blind jump. We'll go together. I grab her hand and we look at one another for a moment. We're the last two. We jump. We fall and pass through the dust and shadows. There is a weightlessness to the space inside the car. Michelle and I hold on to one another as I try to move my way forward. I can feel the sides of the train car as I pull along. I can't feel the floor though. Finally, I can touch the other side. There's a ladder. I grab hold of the first rung and pull. It's slow going, but I am making progress. Michelle feels like dead weight at this point, but I keep pulling. Finally, we break through the shadow stuff and I take a full breath of air. Was I not breathing before? I pull up Michelle, but I can feel her grip has loosened. I pull harder. An arm surfaces, then the top of her head.
but suddenly she lets go. Her hand opens up and she falls away from me. Something is slippery across her skin. I try my best, but I can't hold on to her. She fades away into the darkness. Another 60 cars later and the sun has crossed over towards the other side. I carry Michelle's equipment with me. She's gone. I still can't see the engine. Just a straight path towards the horizon. I think about jumping off. I think about what happened to my second-in-command, Zeta 2, when he fell, disappearing into the dusty clouds churned up by the screeching wheels. Nobody could see the body. I think about what else is ahead. Animal transport cars filled with bloated stalks of twitching tumors. Flatbeds with burning cars chained down. Tankers of sloshing effluence with a smell that lingers on my tongue instead of my nose. This is an endurance in hell. I've been at this for hours. A full day probably. A train day. Much longer than the 100 cars I wanted to accomplish. I can still see the plume of black smoke in the distance. Doesn't look any smaller or larger than it did earlier. With the sun almost touching the other side of the world, I key up the radio. Zeta 1, light is going to be gone in a bit. I'm going to find a car to stop at. I think I crossed 200, maybe 300 total for this cycle. Lost blue asset, just me now. I have her equipment, if that's worth anything. I go to key up one last time, but I have nothing left to say. This is probably day 4 for me. Or is it 5? I should be thirsty. I should be almost dying of thirst, in fact. But I feel nothing. I feel empty. But I can still keep moving. Just a few more cars for the day. Really, I'm just scouting for a place to hunker down when the sun is gone. It's too dark to move at night. I come across a passenger car with an open vent. As I hop down, I nearly fall through the wooden floor. My foot breaks through, but I'm able to pull it free. All I see is dust and the spinning axle holding the train car up. The glass windows are all shattered on the inside. The seats are ripped and moldy. I doubt anyone is going to ask to see my tickets. I sit down right as the sun falls over the edge. I feel the book in my vest. I open to try and look at it again. It's starting to make more sense. Looks clearer than before. I can make out a few sentences. In the land of ash, and old rusty worm slithers, and hungry head glares. Dreamers all aboard. Take a seat when the maw shuts. Dreamers all aboard. I've lost track of time. I've only been here since yesterday. Regular time, I think. Streaks of orange light shift to purple, then deep blue just before the sky is swallowed in black. The light is almost out now. I'm so tired. I can wait here. I can rest here. Maybe even sleep. I key the radio up one last time before it goes completely black in the car. Static. But there is also something faint behind the noise. I press my ear into the radio. I can barely hear it. A train whistle. SCP-716 is a large locomotive and a variable number of cars, between 8 and 20 on average. Both the locomotive and cars appear to be in an advanced state of neglect. Physical damage dealt to SCP-716 appears to slowly regenerate over time. However, it maintains an appearance of extreme neglect and rust. SCP-716 can be physically moved with difficulty. However, the locomotive appears to be unable to function normally, and appears to be missing many critical parts. SCP-716 exhibits a select form of inconsistent topography. While appearing to have a set number of rail cars from outside observation, the train exhibits an apparently unlimited amount of cars when entered. Almost all of these cars are enclosed and appear to be of random types: passenger, tanker, animal transport, mail, and others. Many of them exhibit other anomalous properties. Some notable and recurring cars are a horse transport car with horse corpses hanging from ropes made of sheep tendon, a tanker car filled with a mixture of crude oil and human bile, a large transport car filled with stacks of keys made of many different materials. SCP-716 is also capable of 2 forms of transport. To begin with, it can travel and move in a manner consistent with a locomotive of similar dimensions, despite the lack of vital parts, any form of fuel or conductor. While it appears to prefer traveling on current or former rail tracks, SCP-716 is capable of overland movement as well, in a manner similar to SCP-1489. The second transportation movement form exhibited by SCP-716 has only been observed with human subjects on board. The probability of triggering this mode appears to be largely random, but is more common in cases of groups of 5 or more subjects. Subjects report that SCP-716 will suddenly shift and begin to move, rapidly accelerating to top speed. Outside observation will show that regardless of subject reports and received data, SCP-716 remains completely still. Once SCP-716 begins this form of transportation movement, subjects become unrecoverable. So what are you telling me, Doc? All I have to do is to descend this staircase and the charges will be dropped? I'll be a free man again? I asked in a storm of questions. Dr. Zelensky just nodded, with the guard standing idly by his side. To be honest, I hadn't even heard about the SCP Foundation until they showed up at the prison. I wasn't even sure where they'd taken me. I'd been transported in a windowless van with a bag over my head for all of 12 hours. During all that time, the doctor was the only one of the numerous members that had ever spoken a word to me. While the situation creeped me out, the deal was simply too good to pass on. Descend the staircase, find the bottom, and come back up, he'd said matter-of-factly. The place looked like some kind of college campus, and the staircase in question was hidden behind a set of electronically locked doors. They hadn't exactly allowed me time to ask many questions. Whatever work I had to do down there, it beat life in prison. So, how deep does it go? I asked. The most recent subject managed to descend 469 flights, approximately 1.8 kilometers, Zelensky said. You kidding me, Doc? How the hell is that possible? We don't know, but not to worry. You've been given enough supplies for 2 days down there. In your kit, you have a flashlight that should last a week before needing to be recharged. We'll be watching you through that camera, and we'll keep in touch via radio, he explained as he pointed to my bag. I turned to look at the still locked door. A few days in the darkness in exchange for freedom wasn't all that bad of a deal, but the implications of the journey was enough to put the fear of God back in me. Something about the place, the empty hallways, and the weird smell in the air just felt wrong. All right, let's do it, I guess. Without further ado, they opened the doors. In front of me lay a pitch-black room barely touched by the headlamp I wore, obscuring a set of stairs going downwards. Good luck, Subject D9923, Zelensky said as they closed the door behind me. I have a name, you know, I shot back, but they were already gone. I started my descent, counting the steps and trying to calculate how long it would take me to go down almost 500 flights of stairs. Within 13 steps between each landing, it didn't exactly take long. I counted each landing as I turned to continue down. 7, 8, 9. The light I held barely illuminated more than a few steps ahead, which seemed so odd considering how powerful the thing was supposed to be. It felt as if the darkness swallowed the light before it could touch anything physical, causing it to just hang limply in the air. As I reached the 20th landing, I paused to catch my breath. I'd always considered myself to be in decent shape, but the atmosphere underground negated any effort I'd put into my own health. Then the radio scurried to life, and I could hear Zelensky's voice on the other end. Why did you stop? He asked. I just needed a breather. There's something about the air. It's heavy, I said as I took another deep breath. And it kind of smells rotten, like a mixture of piss, blood, and mold. You know anything about... I stopped dead in my tracks as I heard another sound coming from a few flights of stairs below. It sounded like something sobbing, a child. Though I couldn't tell whether it was a girl or young boy, it definitely sounded upset. Hello? I called out into the darkness.
Do you hear something?
Zelensky asked over the radio. Yeah, there's a kid down there asking for help, I said.
Hey, kid, you hear me?
Keep going down, Zelensky ordered, not even fazed by the sound. Aren't you going to send someone down to help? I asked. Just keep moving. So I descended another few flights of stairs. All the while, the crying remained the same, as if the kid was going down at the same pace as myself. I started rushing down, trying to catch up with the crying, but no matter how fast or slow I moved, the distance between myself and the child never changed. By the time I stopped for another break, I'd lost track of how far down I'd gone. Doc, I can't catch up with the kid. What the hell is going on down here? Just keep moving. Let us know if you notice any changes. If not for the promise of freedom, I would have turned around then and there. But I was a stubborn man, and while I knew the eventual ascent would be a pain in the ass, I couldn't stop. With the dream of fresh air and sunlight on my skin, I kept going down. About an hour passed, and the crying hadn't changed in intensity. It just kept repeating the same calls for help. I'd already gotten accustomed to them, to the point where they didn't even bother me anymore. I reached the nth landing, turning around for another flight of stairs, when I stopped dead in my tracks. Just a few feet in front of me stood a strange, pale creature. Its face had no nostrils, no mouth, and the eyes were just white balls sunken into its skull. I stumbled back onto the landing above, getting ready to run, but by the time I regained my senses, it was already gone. What was that thing? I screamed into the radio. That was SCP-087-1. Keep moving. You've almost reached the 400th flight. I'm not going anywhere until I know where that thing went. And what it is? I demanded. We don't know, he responded. I turned around to ascend, but I knew aborting the mission would warrant a lifetime in prison. D9923, what are you doing? Zelensky asked through the radio. If you want to gain your freedom, you need to keep moving down. Is that thing dangerous? I asked. Not if you stay calm and make sure it doesn't get too close. That doesn't exactly reassure me, I said. Every subject has encountered SCP-087-1. Those that stayed calm all made it back in one piece. And the others? We never regained contact with subject D9884, the most recent subject. So I stay focused and I stay alive, is that it? I asked. Yes. With that, I took another deep breath and continued walking down. After the encounter with the pale creature, the crying had subsided, but the bizarre smell had just gotten more intense. How far down am I? I asked. You've just reached the 547th flight, Zelensky said. How am I supposed to get back up? Getting down here was one thing, but you can rest once you reach the bottom. You have enough supplies. I continued down a few more flights before I noticed a strange patch on one of the landings. I bent down to get a better view, just gently prodding the patch. It was kind of dry, but clearly organic in nature. I picked it up when it finally hit me that I was holding on to old human skin. Oh my God, I found something, I said as I held the piece of skin up to the camera. A few feet away, I noticed something else on the ground, a camera identical to the one I was holding. That belonged to subject D9884, Zelensky said. That's his skin too, I guess. Her skin, Zelensky corrected. That was the final straw. I stood up and turned around, ready to go back to prison. The high risk of death wasn't worth further descent. The staircase clearly had no end. I wasn't sure what the Foundation expected me to find down there, but before I could call to abort, the sound of someone crying returned. That time it wasn't a child, but a grown woman, and she was close. Accompanying the sobs, I could hear footsteps not walking in any particular direction. Do you hear that? She's close, I called out. Hello, miss? I went to the next set of descending stairs, but my light couldn't even reach the next landing. I carefully approached, trying to keep quiet. I went down 3 flights before I found a woman standing in a corner with her face against the wall. She was emaciated beyond anything I thought could have been compatible with life. Pieces of her arms and legs were missing, with large areas of exposed raw flesh. Hey, what happened to you? I asked as I approached her, but she ignored me. She just kept crying. She was wearing what looked like a uniform, clearly belonging to the SCP Foundation. I quickly put the pieces together and realized she must have been the missing subject. Was that why they'd sent me down there? Ignore her. Keep going down, Zelensky said on the other end. Are you kidding me? She needs help. I'm bringing her back up. She's already dead. She's been down there for 7 years. 7 years? I asked to confirm. She went down in 2014. We lost contact with her, and she just never returned. Logically, she couldn't possibly be alive, yet she was clearly not dead. Though she was unresponsive to my questions, she was breathing, even crying.
Don't do the
Zelensky said as the connection was lost. I didn't get that. What did you say? No response. I turned to the woman, gently touching her shoulder. Her skin was wet and sticky. In shock, I retracted my hand, only to realize it was stuck to her body. I pulled her, and her skin just came right off. She didn't even seem to care, but the muscle and bone beneath was revealed in the absence of her skin. Shit, fuck, are you okay? But she just ignored me. I couldn't touch her again in fear that I might hurt her more, so it took a moment to look around for anything she might have dropped. Apart from some half-rotten chunks of flesh, there was nothing there. He's coming, she suddenly whispered. What was that? I asked. He's coming. I turned around to see the same pale creature I'd encountered a couple of 100 flights above. This time it was moving closer. The woman continued to cry, but the creature didn't even seem to notice her. It was coming for me, and I had to run. With a heavy heart, I turned around and fled up the stairs. I only occasionally peeked behind me, but no matter how fast I moved, the creature was always right there. With the heavy air in my worn-out body, I didn't even get 50 flights before I collapsed. I took another peek behind to see that the creature had stopped. It was just staring at me with unblinking eyes. Dr. Zelensky, are you there? I begged. No response. I just kept climbing, periodically looking behind to see the creature still there. I was slow, exhausted, and beaten, but I kept climbing. Hours passed, maybe even a day before I counted the 600th flight of stairs ascended. Still, I couldn't find the way out. I kept trying to regain contact, but I was lost in an infinite loop with no escape. I climbed 1,000 flights, reaching levels far above the original entrance. But nothing changed. 2 days passed, and I ran out of supplies. I knew it would only be a matter of time before I succumbed to my surroundings. The creature was still there, but it never attacked. It just waited for me to die from exhaustion. So I sat down, and recorded one final message using the camera given to me by the Foundation. I've accepted that I'm never leaving this place. I want this to serve as a warning to anyone approached by the Foundation. Do not enter this place. I don't know where it leads, but wherever it goes, we weren't meant to find it. SCP-087's location is unknown. The doorway leading to SCP-087 is constructed of reinforced steel with an electro-release lock mechanism. The lock mechanism on the doorknob will not release unless an unknown amount of volts are applied in conjunction with counterclockwise rotation of the key. The inside of the door is lined with 6 centimeters of industrial foam padding. Due to the results of the final exploration, no personnel are permitted access to SCP-087. SCP-087 is an unlit platform staircase. Stairs descend on a 38-degree angle for 13 steps before reaching a semicircular platform of approximately 3 meters in diameter. Descent direction rotates 180 degrees at each platform. The design of SCP-087 limits subjects to a visual range of approximately 1.5 flights. A light source is required for any subjects exploring SCP-087, as there are no lighting fixtures or windows present. Lighting sources better than 75 watts have shown to be ineffective, as SCP-087 seems to absorb excess light. Subjects report, and audio recordings confirm the distressed vocalizations from what is presumed to be a child. The source of the distress calls is estimated to be located approximately 200 meters below the initial platform. However, any attempts to descend the staircase have failed to bring subjects closer to the source. The depth of the descent calculated from Exploration 4, the longest exploration, is shown to be far beyond both the possible structure of both the building and geological surroundings. At this time, it is unknown if SCP-087 has an endpoint. "Tell me again what you have to do," I said sternly as I ordered the subject to repeat his task for the 100th time. We were already standing outside the door to the seemingly harmless suburban home. The house was a picture-perfect home, taken straight out of the 70s, abandoned and sealed off from the general public following the first incident in 1975. No sooner did the Foundation learn about the building's existence than it was taken over. "I have to sit down in front of the television, turn it on, and report everything I see," the subject said. He was a middle-aged man in decent shape, but broke after placing a few stupid bets on risky stocks. For him, it was as bad as a gambling addiction, with a predictable outcome. In the span of 5 years, he's lost his job, his house, and his family. If not for the Foundation, he'd still be living on the street. Exactly. I'd already explained the risks. Though it had scared away many a possible subject, the man was too desperate. "What if it happens to me too?" he asked. "You'll be sedated before you can get hurt. You won't come to any physical harm." He nodded understandingly. He'd already signed the documents, and a sizable paycheck would be put into his account upon completion of the task. He was the 6th man we'd sent in, but only the 2nd civilian. The first 4 had all been Class D personnel, each of which suffered severe mental deterioration after only 15 minutes in the room. If not for my own clearance, I'd enter the room myself to finally understand what all these men had seen. But as the Foundation rules stated, no Class C personnel or above was allowed to have any contact with SCP-6083. And following the failure of our prior operations, we'd taken in desperate subjects with no other options. "It's time. We'll be observing you through the camera you have mounted to your helmet," I explained. "Why didn't you just send in like a robot or something and film the television?" he asked. "It doesn't work like that, and that's all you need to know." He looked nervous, and rightfully so. He wasn't a big believer in severe mental illness, thinking most of it could be overcome by sheer willpower, which is why he'd signed up for the project. In many ways, he was the ideal subject, stubborn and ignorant, looking for an easy paycheck. I'd explained the risks, but no matter what kind of details I gave him, he just didn't take it all that serious. Still, the stories had put at least some level of fear into him. "I'm ready," he said, and with that, we sent him inside. The house was covered in dust. Ancient furniture and ugly green wallpaper covered the walls, with pictures of a family all died decades earlier. All of them had overdone hairstyles and clothes that had long since gone out of fashion. But in the pictures, they couldn't possibly have foreseen what would happen to them after ordering a then-new television set. A 1974 Sony KV-1920 color had been the device to take the life of their entire family. Their first evening together, sitting down as a family with dinner and a broadcast, excited to finally have their very own window into the rapidly developing entertainment world. Down the hall, third door on the left, I told the subject through the radio. "Yeah, I remember from the briefing," he said back. He needed to enter the living room, where the family had enjoyed their last supper. As he opened the ancient door, dried out, black blood splatters were still visible on the carpeted floor. It was just fragments of former times, as the building had been sterilized months after the incident. The subject flicked a light switch, but the room remained dark. "It's kind of dark in here," he said. "Only the television set is still supplied. Just turn your flashlight on," I ordered. He did as commanded, producing a strong beam that illuminated the room. It didn't have much more than a dining table and a sofa sitting in front of the television. The sofa was still discolored from the blood, long since dried out and harmless, but a constant reminder of the horrors that had taken place. "Is that blood?" the subject asked. "I thought you said I wouldn't get hurt." "You won't as long as you're alone in there." "What does that mean?" he asked, getting agitated. "There is no one else in there to harm you, don't worry." The family that had lived there consisted of a father, a mother, and their 2 kids, a daughter and a son. As they turned the television on, they'd seen something that put the entirety of the family into a catatonic state, all except for the father, who silently went to the kitchen to grab a knife. Then he walked back and calmly slit his family's throat before collapsing on the floor himself for the remainder of his life. He never uttered another word. He just spent his time in the Foundation's psychiatric clinic, filling papers with black ink until he died from a heart attack 15 years later. "So, I just flick the TV on and sit down?" he asked. "And describe what you see," I clarified. He did as instructed, switching the old television set on. As it came to life, a storm of static filled the screen. Of course, what the subject himself saw was a different story, but the pictures produced could not be carried through a camera. They would only be visible to those who personally visited the room. "What do you see?" I asked. He remained silent for a moment, fixated on a secret image hidden from the rest of the world. "Mr. Carlson, I need you to describe the images." "Sorry, it's a family sitting down for dinner. They're eating a roasted chicken, but..." "But what?" I asked. "They're not looking at each other. They all look terrified. It's like they know they're being filmed." Through the radio, I could hear the subject getting stressed as his breathing got more frequent. "They're not swallowing. They're just shoving more food into their mouths and chewing. What the hell is this?" he asked. "Keep watching." Another minute passed, and according to the subject, the picture didn't change. "The screen went dark," he said. For us, all it displayed was an incomprehensible mess of static. "Keep watching." "Oh, now it's showing an abandoned inside pool. There's no water in it, but there's still a man walking around with swimming trunks. Wait, he's getting ready to dive in from the 25 feet board." He paused in anticipation. "Oh my God, he jumped. He's fucking dead. Tell me that wasn't real." Truth be told, none of us knew. Every subject had always seen the same images, but their origin couldn't be determined. In many ways, it was as if the footage existed in a separate reality. The current subject had lasted 5 minutes that far, a third of the average. No one had ever made it past the 15-minute mark. Now there's just a woman dancing. She's wearing one of those ballet outfits. She's crying. The room is full of people, but they're all facing away from the dancing woman. They're not blinking. What is this shit? Keep watching. You need to stay in there for 15 minutes. For each scene that passed, the subject kept getting more unsettled. As he described the events that took place, his voice started to crack, fear finally breaking through the stubborn facade. Now there's a man just sitting on the floor. He's dragging his hand over a rough, concrete wall. He's starting to bleed, but he's so emotionless. Oh no, he's not stopping. Shit, I can see his bones. I already knew where the scene would go. Though I'd never personally witnessed it, I'd been told the same story by each of the 5 prior subjects. The man in the footage would keep dragging his hand along the wall until little more than bare bone remained. never showing a single sign of pain. Then the 15-minute mark approached, and the subject had fallen silent. "Mr. Carlson, are you still with us?" I asked. "Yeah, He trailed off. "What do you see?" I asked. "Now there's a child. I don't know if it's a girl or a boy. It's wearing some sort of dark gown, sitting in what I think is a basement. It's whispering something, but I can't hear." The words got stuck in his throat. "Wait, it said my name. How can that be?" he said in shock. "Keep talking to us," I ordered. "The kid is talking to me. It's saying, 'No, that's not true. That's a lie,'" he said, raising his voice to a mild scream. "Mr. Carlson, keep describing what you see. It's telling me about my past, but it's not how it happened. It's a twisted version of the truth." Again, he paused. His breathing was getting more labored. It was clear how distressed he'd become. At the 16-minute mark, the subject had survived longer than anyone else. "He told me the truth," the subject said. "What truth?" I asked. "He told me what's going to happen to me when I die." "What exactly did he tell you?" I asked. But the subject never responded. He just sat quietly and stared at the screen, static, catatonic like all the rest. Still, we'd made progress. We'd finally learned what the theme of the information had been. But before we could truly end the project, we needed more. "Cut the power. Bring me the subject," I told the guards. "This one won't give us any more information, but at least he didn't try to kill himself." With a simple "yes, sir," the two guards went to retrieve the broken man. He'd fulfilled his part of the deal, but I feared he'd never be healthy enough to reap the benefits. Once the room had been cleared, I returned to the facility to write my report. We were moving forward, but to finally learn the truth, I was going to need more subjects. SCP-6083 is a television set model, 1974 Sony KV-1920, located in a suburban-style home, isolated since 1975 following the first incident. SCP-6083 is located within the living room and remains the only object in the house still connected to any power source. Upon activation, the TV emits a static-like picture as seen by observation through cameras. The only individuals able to gain any meaning from the pictures are subjects situated directly in front of the television set. Since the death of the family originally living in the house, a total of 6 subjects have been witness to the hidden broadcasts, 4 of which were D-class personnel and 2 civilians. All remain in a permanent catatonic state. I spent the last 15 years of my life observing a creature we've known as SCP-6009. No one has ever thought to ask its name, but then again, only 5 people ever had the chance to speak it, all of which died shortly after the discussion. The first 2 were unrecorded interviews, and the content of these discussions won't ever be known, though we quickly learned that the deaths were directly caused by conversing with the creature itself. Once known, we sent in a team to set up cameras and microphones. The creature sat idly by as the team prepared everything, never attempting to engage the men in conversation. It's worth mentioning that each of the men sent inside had been deaf from birth, as each individual that went inside experiences an intense compulsion to ask the creature questions. But, as we immediately learned during the next few sessions, there are questions that enrage SCP-6009, questions not meant to be answered. Our mission statement is to retrieve the answers to those questions and the questions themselves, but bringing the data back outside has proven to be more than just a difficult task. For reference, here's the transcript from the last recorded meeting, where I was simply working as Class D observer, an expendable worker doing little more than taking notes. I'd already taken part in 2 others. One subject had immediately died, and the second committed suicide shortly after the interview before being able to relay what they'd learned inside. Subject D-1783, Daniel Harris. "Are you prepared to interview SCP-6009? Dr. Zelinsky asked. The subject nodded, his face pale white from what could only be utter horror. Neither of us had ever seen the creature that loomed inside the old classroom. We just knew that it had killed 2 people and that it wasn't human. "So I just ask it a few questions and then I come back out?" Subject D-1783 asked. "Exactly. You've already been given the list of questions. Once you're done, leave the room. Do not ask any personal questions. Stick to the script." What happens if I mess up? He asked. SCP-6009 will remain friendly until you ask a wrong question. Any question not deemed safe might result in your death. Stick to the script and you'll be fine, Zelinsky explained. The script was a collection of questions Zelinsky had deemed safe after observing the little information we'd gotten out from the room intact. By some strange force of nature, most data ended up corrupted, including the one question that would always lead to the interviewer's death. With that, I turned on the camera stuck inside the classroom. It had been abandoned for the better part of a decade, concealing a creature that had never made any attempt at escape, nor did it seem to experience hunger, thirst, or boredom. It just sat in the front of the room. At first sight, it looked like a human dressed in a trench coat, wearing a large hat. It was looking down at the table, keeping it hidden from the camera. How the creature ended up inside the classroom has remained unknown. From the little non-redacted parts of the document I'd read, it had suddenly appeared during a history lesson, killing the teacher as the children fled the room. Then it sat itself down and waited as the entire school got put into quarantine, led by the SCP Foundation. The subject walked inside, his hands trembling as he held onto the pile of papers. He'd only signed up because of his family. His kid needed urgent medical treatment that the Foundation promised to provide after a quick job. Even with the high likelihood of death, the man was willing to risk it for his child. It made me despise the Foundation more than I already did. But the thing about SCP is that once you join, you're in for life.
Approach the desk.
Zelinsky said through the speaker systems. But what was emitted on the other side was little more than scrambled static noises. It wasn't unexpected. The room emitted extremely high levels of electromagnetic interference, meaning we'd struggle to keep live contact while the subject was inside. Still, the camera seemed unaffected. We had visuals, but no audio. Subject D1783, respond, Zelinsky ordered. Silence. He didn't seem worried nor surprised, but the protocol dictated that we always attempt to maintain contact with the subject inside. We were forced to helplessly watch as the subject sat down with SCP-6009. The creature lifted its head, finally revealing its face. Its head was weirdly oblong, without eyes, a nose, nor ears. All it contained was a sliver of an opening that resembled a mouth, with exceptionally thin, tall teeth. He opened his mouth and started to talk, letting out words we could hear. As he spoke, I could see rows upon rows of the thin teeth, counting upwards of 200. The creature seemed to smile, though if it was happy or had simply been created with anatomy resembling smiling, I didn't know. Then the subject asked his first question, one I hadn't been cleared to read. The entire script was classified for Class C personnel and below, with the exception of the few people actually going inside to converse with SCP-6009. Zelinsky knew the audio wouldn't work, which remains the only reason why he allowed me to remain there as an observer. If you can get the audio working, I'll grant you access, he'd always stated, knowing it would be an impossible feat. For 2 hours, I sat in front of the monitor, watching them talk silently. I tried to reset the feed on numerous occasions, but always without success. Zelinsky looked less worried. He was the only Class B personnel I'd ever seen enter the facility, and based on the few rumors I'd heard, he'd identified upwards of a dozen SCP entities. I can't get the audio working, Doctor, I said nervously. That was to be expected. Just keep your eyes on the subject, he ordered. Another hour passed, and the subject kept getting more and more erratic. He was moving around on the chair, peeking behind himself as if expecting something to jump out from the dark corners. Even without measuring his vitals or hearing him, I could tell his breathing was getting more and more erratic. But then he suddenly froze in his chair. The creature's mouth widened, revealing even more teeth, but it didn't move from its chair. Instead, it looked back down at the desk, once again obscuring its face. The subject fell to the ground as he wriggled around in panic. His face had been sealed off by skin, as if his facial features had never been there. He just lay on the ground, suffocating. I jumped off from my chair, ready to call the guards and rush inside to save him, but Zelinsky ordered us to stand by. Do not approach them, he ordered. Do you want to end up like him? We stood back, knowing better than to go against the order of someone with his rank. All the while, the subject lay dying inside the room, as the creature sat quietly in his chair. Once he'd stopped moving completely, a few tendrils shot out from under the desk. They wrapped themselves around the subject, seeming to melt his flesh, removing any evidence that the subject had even entered the room. The microphone and recorder both got swallowed up by the creature, but there was a secondary receiver in the room, which as always ended up with corrupt data. The creature sat back in its chair. Which question triggered it? I asked. We'll see, Zelensky responded calmly, seemingly unaffected by the subject's death. Stay here, he continued as he walked towards the room. Protocol strongly dictated that we send a security team inside the room to retrieve the footage. But Zelensky just walked up to the door, ordered the guard to open it, and went inside. Doctor, what are you? I tried to get out, but he'd already gone inside. He walked up to the front of the classroom and stood in front of the creature. The creature lifted its head, but it wasn't smiling. Zelensky spoke a few words to it, but due to the lack of audio, I had no idea what they were. The creature frowned, but responded to the question, and Zelensky turned around to pick up the secondary receiver. With that, he came back outside, handed me the receiver, and told me to gather all non-corrupt data I could get my hands on. I just sat there in disbelief at what I had just seen, but the doctor seemed unfazed by the entire situation. What did you ask it? I stuttered. He gave me a cold look. I asked if it knew who I am, was all he said. And what did it say? I asked meekly. That's beyond your rank. I want the cleaned recording by the end of the day. Drop it off at the usual location, he ordered. Those were the last words Zelensky ever spoke to me. He never did send another subject, nor did he return in person. The recording I cleared up still remained a mystery. Though I was tasked with making it readable, I was by no means allowed to listen to the actual conversation. Whatever Zelensky learned from his own and the subject's question, he got what he wanted. But I remain here, observing the creature as it patiently awaits its next victim. It still hasn't made any attempts at escaping, nor do I think it ever will. SCP-6009 appeared as an abnormally tall man wearing a trench coat and a large hat serving to cover most of its face. It spends all its time sitting in the teacher's chair in the front of the classroom, only lifting its head when approached by a subject. The subject may ask the creature any question it desires, and will get a truthful answer. However, there are certain forbidden questions that will ultimately result in the subject's death if asked. SCP-6009 emits a hereby unknown type of electromagnetic radiation, causing fatal interference with any audio equipment brought into the room. As such, no audio transmission has been possible. Local devices may be brought inside, but the data will inevitably end up corrupt with little recovery possible. It had been another routine day guarding the site of SCP-015. The tall brick warehouse stood up 3 stories high and cast a long shadow in the adjacent parking lot. It was just me and a big fella named Marcus on shift today. The patrol was nearly always the same: walk the perimeter, report odd behavior, keep people away. Every once in a while, we are asked to actually go inside the building, just to make sure it still looks the same. I am glad to say that since being assigned here, it has looked the same since day one. Inside the building, past the large double doors, is a tangle of metal pipes. And not just pipes, boilers, valves, vents, and anything else connected to the chaotic bird's nest. It was an awful thing to look at. A plumber's absolute nightmare. We always heard stories about what flowed in the connected tubes. I dared not even to touch one of them for fear it might want to burst and spray me with God knows what. To say that it was alive was an understatement. The damn thing breathed. It groaned. I swear it even has its own language of clinks and knocks. The crazy thing talking to itself or talking to us. I could never be sure. It is almost quitting time, and I'm waiting for Marcus to hurry up and punch out with me. He ran to go use the portable bathroom in the parking lot before leaving, just to take a quick leak. Well, this quick leak has been going on 10 minutes now, and I am getting antsy. I walk over to where the porta-john is when I noticed how something didn't seem right. The walls appear to be bending inward slightly, and it was making a strange whistling sound, as if air was being pulled inside. Marcus, you there? No answer. Marcus, this isn't funny. Get your fat ass out here. Still nothing. I had a small multi-tool with me, so I could jimmy the latch open. With some brute force and ignorance, the simple latch lifted up. The door, however, did not open. With even more brute force, I pull with all my strength, and it becomes apparent why it is so difficult. There is a strong vacuum inside the stall, and it is sucking the door closed. Slowly, I am able to worm my fingers into the crease and then a foot. I get the door open finally, and I stifle a yelp from what I see. It takes me about 3 seconds to figure out what has happened. The pipes. The damn SCP has tunneled under the asphalt and reached the porta-john. Inch by inch, it must have tunneled through the dirt and gravel to reach here. The entire opening was about 3 feet in diameter. The toilet was ripped free. Not even the floor was left. I push a little further in to see if I can shine a light down the center. The wind rushing in was noisy. It drowns out my shouting as I call for Marcus down the metal throat. I can't see anything. No debris. No Marcus. Nothing. It was then that I lost my grip on the door and it comes swinging back closed, pushing me over the edge. I catch myself on the lift for a moment, but with my whole body being dragged in with the air, it didn't take long till my fingers lost against the slippery edge and I fall in. I fall more than what should be reasonable. Out of instinct, I reach out towards the walls, but the rough metal skins my hands and arms. Not even the soles of my shoes help, as the speed just grates the rubber right off like soft cheese. The only light I have is my small flashlight. I try to look up and down, but there's barely enough room. Before I have time to contemplate what is at the bottom of the pipe, it suddenly opens up to a large chamber, and I fall into a pool of liquid. It is cold and thicker than water. My entire body is submerged in the stuff as I scramble back to the surface. It stings my eyes as I paddle and grit my teeth. Breaking the surface, I take a long gasp of air. I didn't have much breath going in, as it was lost to the screaming. A couple of panicked flailing, and my arm touches something solid. I grab it and pull myself up on it. From the feel of it, I'm sure that it is debris from the porta-john above, likely the toilet itself. I wipe the slick liquid off my face and eyes and reach again for the small-handled flashlight. I look at my hand, which was bleeding from abrasions. It is covered in a slippery blackness. Breathing through my nose, I instantly recognize the smell from my garage at home. Motor oil? The air was choked with fumes, but still breathable, thankfully. I have no urge to light a match either. After clearing my throat, I call out for Marcus with a hoarse voice. The chamber echoes on, letting me know that this too is just another pipe. The river of oil has a small current to it and is pulling me upstream. I desperately search for the hole I fell through, but I can't seem to find it now. My mind starts racing. I need to act before I'm lost forever. My phone? No signal, of course. Anything to grab onto? Smooth inner walls on either side that go on further than my light can reach. Forget Marcus. I am so fucked. After about a few minutes of floating on the world's worst lazy river, I can hear a rush of gurgling up ahead. Peering with my flashlight, I can see the entire river of oil is flowing up like a reverse waterfall and into another pipe above. Instinctually, I paddle like mad over to the side to try and go around it, my arms and legs flailing webs of slick sludge as I close in on the walls. Finally, I touch the solid sides, but still nothing to hold on to. I can feel the pull of gravity lifting my body up, and the oil flows into the ceiling. My toilet raft is pulled from my grip, and I am at the mercy of the current. As my fingernails scrape and splinter along the rough metal walls, I am somehow able to cling like a gecko and bypass the waterfall, only to fall out of the open pipe completely onto a web of crisscrossing copper tubing. Behind me, the black effluence falls up and out of the open pipe and into another above it, which then bends through the tangled mass and into infinity. I am able to stand and wipe the oil off my skin. It is soaked into my clothes and hair, and somehow I lost my shoes while swimming. It is then when I notice that these pipes are too warm to stand on, so I quickly hobble over to a few larger steel pipes and descend them like steps, only pausing to have a spark of thought that I am alive, just hopelessly lost. The open area is a relief to see, even though steam is blocking most of my vision. I have no idea where I am in the underground, if even I am underground. Out of the corner of my eye, I see a person running through the vertical columns of pipe. They look hunched over, wearing only coveralls and a tattered shirt. Stringy gray hair was patchy, like the strands have been plucked out in certain spots. Eyes were glazed over in a frost, but I was pretty sure they could still see regardless. In their hands, it looks like a large plunger. Every so often, they'd stop and tap on a pipe with a white knuckle, then listen. Hey! I finally shout as I try to weave, duck, crouch, and hop my way over. The person stops just before rapping on another metal tube and looks through a tangle of lines to see me. A woman, possibly of Asian descent and about my age, though at a glance, she could pass for someone much older due to her features and malnutrition. Her expression is emotionless as her cataract eyes focus through the steam. Hi, she simply replies. I can already tell there's a thick accent. Hi? Can you help me out here? Is there a way back out? My name is... No names. No back, only fix, you help. Help? Look, I don't know what is going on, but if you could just, hey! Before I could finish, she darts down another opening. I am in pursuit, doing my best to keep up with her. I see that she has been down here a long time. With the skill, she is able to navigate through the winding mess of tubing. I see her duck into one open pipe, just to appear from another above. then back through another and appearing behind me. Too slow, this way. I pivot on my heels and duck under a red-hot boiler. A frozen pipe with icicles blocks my path, so I have to move around. Finally, I catch up to her, and I am out of breath. Crouched over a manifold of pipes going in and out, she taps several times in specific areas. Yes, it here problem. She lifts open a drain to a pipe no bigger than the thickness of my leg and starts plunging. The horrible suction makes the surrounding pipes gurgle with each thrust and pull. She continues to talk to me as she works. Tap pipes, listen, can hear them. Who are you? I ask. What are you? How long have you... But I don't get to finish my sentence. Plumber, long time, long time. I fix, now you here, you fix, slow man will work. I shake my head fervently. No. I'm not supposed to be here. Can't you tell me how to get out? No out, only fix, let live, eat. The plumber speaks in rhythm to her plunging, up and down trying to get something to come up. I open my mouth to respond, but I'm quickly interrupted. Slow man, turn valve. Plumber points with a stern finger next to me. I nod and grab hold of the rusty wheel and start to turn. Other way, slow man. This training, pay attention, she barks. I correct and start turning the other direction. The threads and joints squeal with resistance as I give 5 full turns. Not easily done, but after halfway on the 6th, I can feel it end abruptly and I am stopped. Pipes start to groan and gurgle louder as something very solid gives way beneath us and is pulled up. The wet suction reaches a higher pitch with each pump until it breaches and touches the plunger. What the plumber pulls out makes me trip and fall backwards. It is a head, steamed, cooked, and bloated. The flesh falling off it like clotted cream. The spine and tendons we're still holding, and pieces of a torso are pulled out. The mess of an adult human lays next to the drain in a steaming pile of hot fat and bones. Clog, fat clog, the plumber complained. When the smell hit me, I vomited into another drain near me. I could tell by what was left of the face that this was Marcus. He must have fell in boiling water or something. Why sick? Have food. I can't. You can't. I have to. Plumber was already eating out of the pile that was once Marcus. Again, I dry heave with nothing left in my stomach. Tears well up in my eyes as the pain in my chest equalizes with the pain in my gut. Oh God, why? I painfully asked. Why? The plumber swallows a handful of fatty pulp. Why what? Why here? I nod and wipe my eyes and mouth clean with a bit of sleeve. It job. Oh, slow man, sad. Hobbling over, the plumber pats me on the back. Slow man will learn. Have job, good job. You start. I feel myself getting pushed towards a dim area where the pipes make up the corridor. There is hissing and clanking all around. The plumber puts a tool in my hand. It is a plunger. You fell long ways down. Down. This sewage section, but not take my job. Your job deeper. Sump job. No, I can't work down here. It's all pipes and valves and pipes. I'd rather die. Nope, no die, fix. I am shoved hard down the corridor and almost trip. It is darker here than the rest of this place, and colder too. I swing the handle at her to keep her back. Leave me alone. I'll find my own fucking way out. No out, just fix. Fix well, get better job. Slow man is plumber now. I take a step back and my foot touches only air. I'm at a ledge and I fall deeper. My hoarse scream echoes across the pipes that travel vertically down into the dark. Work well, plumber. Time passes. It must have been a week since I fell. A week since I've seen light. A week of shouts and stumbling. I found a place to rest and sleep on top of some warm ductwork. I don't know what to do or if someone is even looking for me. More time passes. I can find things in the dark that are edible. Water that is drinkable. I'm just glad I can't see what it actually looks like. It's honestly not that terrible. How long have I been here? I found a wet shoe today while cleaning out some grating. I bet it was Marcus's. I will call it Marcus Jr. Hello, Marcus Jr. Have I always been here? Waist deep in the mire, I can feel the soft solids between my bare toes. With a hand on a familiar skinny pipe, I guide along its length in search of the next valve in the line, knocking every so often as I progress. My plunger is held tightly in my other hand. I have shuffled off across continents of circular catacombs that whistle and shudder, oceans of sludge that drip down and collect with endless depth. Marcus Jr. and I will explore it all. Maybe someday we will find the pumps. Time runs like loose sand through fingers. I have forgotten what light even looks like. There is only taste and touch and smell and pipes to guide me. Pipes that talk back to me. Pipes that cry in pain. But Junior and I can fix. I am plumber. SCP-015 is a mass of pipes, vents, boilers, and other various plumbing apparatus completely filling a warehouse. The pipes appear to grow when not under observation. attempting to connect to nearby structures via sewer systems and underground plumbing. SCP-015 contains, at current estimate, over 120 miles of pipes, ranging in diameter from 2.5 centimeters to over 1 meter. Some pipes appear new, while others are rusted and leaking. Pipes have been reported as being made of bone, wood, steel, pressed ash, human flesh, glass, and granite. No pipes composed of lead, PVC plastic, copper, or any other traditional material for the production of pipes have been found. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and smash that like button to get notified every time a new video is released. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out these similar Dr. SCP animations.